Many chums and friends on this show enjoy our great classic British comedy. Like me, you love things that are Dick Emery, Man About the House, the Parkinson Chat Show. One thing I must share with you, by the way, about the Parkinson Chat Show that I was, when I was very young, I was very stunned about was how rehearsed it was. It's a strange thing because I never, up until that point, was invited to some of the later ones for ITV, and I always thought he just ad-libbed it, but no, everything was rehearsed down to almost the exact questions. So I don't know, but you see, for me, you probably know this, for those that have seen any interviews that I've done, never rehearse anything. I just prefer to let the conversation go where it goes, and if the celebrity says something you think, well, that's interesting, we go down that route. Different ways, different, sort of things, the way people are doing it. But I was kind of stunned. I thought I'd just share that with you about Michael Parkinson. One of my favourites, but yeah, even Parky, the great Parky, used to rehearse. Probably they all did, it's probably just me. Back as ever though to one of your favourite stars. I wanted to share this particular sort of memory with you because actually I met this wonderful actor, Frank Thornton, who played, yes, the irreplaceable Captain Peacock in Are You Being Served Quite by Chance. You see, I'd met him briefly before, but very, very briefly, in a TV studio. And one day we were both in this shop, which was just off Charing Cross Road, called Cecil Court. And it was a wonderful shop, sadly no longer there. And it was run by a really nice man called David Drummond. And David really just collected all things theatrical, great posters from the Palladium and the Holborn Empire. He had picture cards of all the wonderful stars, picture goer, it was an emporium that you could just go in and get yourself lost. Well, on this particular day, there I am looking at the card. It wasn't cheap, let me tell you, but there I am just looking at the cards. But I never thought David wanted to sell anything. Do you know what I mean? I always think he was just really a collector. I think he got a bit miffed if you actually wanted to buy anything. It meant he was losing it. But what was interesting about this story was, on that day, I didn't realise the two of the people in the shop were none other than two comedy giants. That's right, Frank Thornton and Henry McGee, the straight man from the equally brilliant Benny Hill. Anyway, we suddenly got chatting and Frank was actually appearing in Me and My Girl down at the Adelphi Theatre, the musical. And we ended up having a cup of tea because there was sort of a cafe, outside, which started as a wonderful, long friendship. I've been lucky enough to meet quite a few people from Are You Being Served, including popping up at an event at Pinewood Studios, meeting Molly Sugden, yes, Mrs. Slocum. Wasn't that brilliant? So naughty but fun, wasn't it? You know what I mean? And the other side of it was, I met also Mike Berry, who was in the sort of latter part of the series. I think he took over from Mr. Lucas, but he was also a pop star. Lovely man, Mike Berry, by the way. Lovely, lovely man. But of course, Frank Thornton was everybody's idea of the floor walker, wasn't he, in Are You Being Served? So successful. Frank told me he never really understood why he'd landed the part. You see, as he pointed out, he got one of those pompous faces that suited those sort of roles, and it was the sort of thing he picked up for years. He'd been in all sorts of things. The Embassy Lark, a spin-off of the Navy Lark. He'd been in The Blood Donor with the brilliant late comedian Tony Hancock. June Whitfield told me all about that. She was wonderful. And, I said, well, when you got the script, did you understand it? And he said, you've got to remember, at that point, those sorts of department stores in the 70s were fading out. And he was concerned that people, the younger people who the BBC were hoping to attract, wouldn't get it. He thought, well, do they know it in this new modern supermarket world? So he said he did go along to a lot of stores, particularly the big stores in London, to just gently observe what the floor walker did. And he said really it was a culmination of quite a few people that he'd observed. He said they were incredibly pompous, and he said the carnation was his own idea, the fact that this gave him a bit of superiority, even though of course he had no superiority over anybody. He said what was brilliant about the writers and the producers, of course, were the fact that they'd literally gathered all of this, Jeremy Lloyd, Jimmy Perry, all of those great minds who worked on all those BBC comedies, and said, look, there is, of course, Mr. Humphries. But he told me that Mr. Humphries' character was nearly booted out because BBC bosses said, nobody's going to accept that. No, it's going to be too alien for prime time. And, the producers and the writers said, no, Mr. Humphries, no show. it was funny, isn't it, to think that, you know, they weren't concerned about Miss Brahms and Mrs. Slocum's over-the-top humour, but Mr. Humphrey's I'm Free offended many. As he also pointed out, he said, you know, young Mr. Grace was an absolute character off camera and had a wonderful career himself. Now, of course, Frank, as I said, we developed a lovely friendship, and I will go into more of this at some point when I get the opportunity. But I wanted to share this with you because just looking through pictures, you find things and think, oh, wow, I've forgotten about that, you know. And he was just such a nice man. Now, obviously, they never realised that Are You Being Served was going to take off in such a spectacular way. As he said to me, he felt it might do 1 or 2 series, but he didn't think it would become the phenomenon that it was. Of course, it spun into Grace and Favour as well, didn't it? Another big success. Frank, of course, sadly passed away at the ripe old age of 92, but he went on to more success, all thanks to another long-running sitcom, playing Inspector Truly of The Yard, of course, in Last of the Summer Winers, as he pointed out to me, another pompous twit. And so he loved playing them, but as I said, he said, I just have the face for this. I'd love to know what you liked about Are You Being Served and what were your memories? Who were your favourite characters in that show? Mine changed. I used to love Mr. Granger, really angry and annoying. And do you remember Mr. Granger in the big screen version of the film? If you haven't seen it, it's free online. Do check it out. Very, very funny. Are You Being Served still makes us laugh all around the world, even today. Does it you? And what's your memories? Neil Sean in the very heart of London.